Ahoy! Today we're doing a very simple and straightforward Gizmo guide. Gizmo is honestly one of the more complex characters in the game. I will keep this as simple as possible though, just to give you a very quick overview of how he works. So beginning with his neutral attack. He has his bow that he can charge, and you can see that after a while the arrow gets ignited. Shoot it at an enemy, they get ignited and take a fair bit of damage from that. But if I was to miss my shots, you will see that my projectiles actually go down, so you don't have infinite projectiles. However, if I hit an enemy with a burning shot, I instantly get a projectile restored. So, as long as you keep hitting enemies and not missing, and you charge the shot long enough for it to be burning, you'll always have arrows. And you can walk around and you can aim up and down, but you cannot change the direction of where you're aiming. The same attack is also the case in the air. You can still navigate around, move forward and backward a little bit, so pretty much your main ranged poke tool. This goes hand in hand with his up attacks, we're going to use that next, which is the popcorn. Now this popcorn can be steered to some degree. If I just hold up, you'll see, actually just goes straight up, but if I press up and attack and then instead hold like down or right, then it will go forward a little bit. So you want to aim it in the direction of the enemy, because if you just aim it up, you see that it's kind of up here in this very unfortunate place where you can't really do much with it, because what you want to do with it is you want to use it against enemies in combination with the arrow, like this. This detonation can be procced with any arrow, but if the arrow is burning, it actually does a fair bit more damage, gets a fair bit more range. Otherwise it's just a, let's see if we can do it here quick, it's a relatively short range detonation, so you want to get a burning arrow on that. The popcorn can also be activated with other moves when you have the right perks for it. Gizmo's side attack is just a 3-punch combo that doesn't really weave into each other that nicely most of the time. You can see it there, if they have enough damage taken, then you can kind of combo it, but it's not the best in terms of trading, but he is a support, so he's not actually meant to have an insane side combo anyways. His down attack is this music note which has armor breaker on it. And the more you charge this attack, the further the notes travel. Like this is just a little bit. This doesn't knock very far, it doesn't do insane amounts of damage, but it is a very nice zoning tool if someone comes close and you charge up quickly. But you gotta keep in mind that you're very open to attacks from the top. Now, let's look at the aerial versions. This is where things get more interesting. This is his up attack, some quick swipes. You can see pretty good knockup potential, pretty good damage. So this is one that you definitely are going to be using a lot. Then you have the side attack, which is more of a forward swipe that can be charged. Doesn't have that much knockback, doesn't have insane damage most of the time, so it's just okay. But what's really big is the down air. It's this triple kick combo, very similar to Jake's skateboard, but actually a lot easier to hit. And this can combo very nicely into an up attack as well. So depending on where you're standing, this is actually a true combo. And then you have the popcorn right there as well. So this is something you're frequently going to be using in matches. And that brings us to his special moves, starting with his music. This basically just stacks these music notes, which can be used in various ways. They can buff allies so that when they dodge, they apply music effects to others, and they can debuff enemies, as you can see here. So, the more notes an enemy touches, the more stacks they get, and at 8 stacks, they get silenced, which means they cannot use any abilities for a while. So if I was standing right next to an enemy, I could just pump that into him, and here you get the silenced effect. But as you can see, that's not the easiest way to launch it, and there are other ways. You can, for example, stack some of the notes and then hit them with a projectile. And the projectile will absorb them. And with the cloud, especially with the popcorn cloud, it's very, very easy. You can just throw out a popcorn cloud and you can start singing. They all get absorbed into the popcorn cloud. And then use your bow and you shoot them all at an enemy. That's much, much easier to stack them quickly. But I will say that even then, it seems very, very difficult to reliably stack 8 stacks, and it feels somewhat unrewarding in my opinion, so you have to be very careful with this. You're going to spend a lot of time just trying to get these notes stacked if you're trying to specifically go for the silence. If you get a good shot off though, like, you know, just quick shot with a bow like this, you can get a lot of stacks relatively quickly. The notes are visible to the enemy though, so most enemies will usually just avoid them. The air special is a bit different because you're kind of sending these notes forward, and this continues on the ground, so you can aim them a lot more towards the enemy, makes it a lot easier to get a few quick stacks on them. So generally I would probably try and stack them like this. The problem is that when you start in the air, you want to start relatively low, because otherwise you end up just having them above the head of the enemy, unless you can hit them into a jump. His up special is an attack with decent knockback potential, but not insane knockback potential, so it's something that you can probably use to poke someone relatively hard, but it takes a lot of damage for them to actually get knocked out with it, unless they're like very close to the edge of the stage. The aerial up special, same thing here, but this also plays into another ability which we'll get to now, and that is the side special. And that's this car. So this car actually has a bit of its own life, so to speak. You can use it like this, you can use it with a wheelie, and depending on what you do, it will actually interact differently when you jump. So when I'm jumping like this, the car just keeps driving forward, and then I can get back into the car. But if I do the wheelie instead, then the car gets launched, in this case off the stage. The side special has a relatively long cooldown, so we're just going to use instant cooldown here. So you don't want to waste your car. But there are various things that the car is useful for. Primarily, this is one of your better tools to actually knock an enemy back a reasonable amount. But also, if you get out of your car and use your up special, your car will get overheated and detonate. And that one actually has a pretty decent knockback when the enemy is at high damage. So demonstrate that, if we're at a 110 damage here, this is a pretty good knockback. Gizmo's down special is a projectile block, which actually just stops projectiles. You can also do that with allies, I'll show you that in a second. Gizmo's air side special is an umbrella that blocks projectiles and also has a pretty strong knockback along with it. And what's really cool about this is after the initial special, you can actually float. So if you're pretty far off stage, this can help you recover relatively easily, because it's kind of float up. So it is relatively hard to knock him out because of this ability alone, as long as you're using it right. What's more, you could use your up special and then your side special if you're like literally at the edge of the stage, and that alone would be enough to just completely recover onto the edge. Gizmo's down special is this spinning attack that actually has okay knockout spike potential compared to most of the other attacks. It's not the best for it either, but it's at least decent for, like, let's say around 140-ish damage. Gizmo also has a few team-related moves. First of all, your car can be used by your teammate as well. They jump into it the same way that you can do it. They interact, and then you just use the car and drive around with it. And Gizmo can also kind of backpack onto an ally. And what you can do then is you can still use certain abilities. Like, for example, you can use your down special to shield your ally from projectiles. You can still use your bow and shoot arrows. And you take part of that damage. And when you jump onto them, you also cleanse them from debuffs. You can see that there is a duration for that, and eventually it runs out and expires, and then you can't backpack them for a while. So it's not infinite, but it's quite a bit of time. Though, you have to keep in mind that you can't use everything. I can use the bow here, or I can use the popcorn, for example, but I can't use any melee attacks, for example, so I can't really peel for my teammate, so to speak. And certain abilities just pull you out of the up special as well. What you can still use is the piano, which is probably the best ability to help your ally when an enemy is close to them, because you can kind of just send the notes out like this. And you can charge it relatively unbothered. Something else that you can do is sing while you're attached to the ally, which I think is pretty strong, because that way the notes get to enemies much quicker and your ally will always have the maximum stacks on them. So this is probably the best way to apply the singing debuff. If you ever want to get out of this form again, you can either use the side special or the up special, or you can just jump. By the way, if you happen to be playing with a rain dog, because the rain dog has fire projectiles, you can actually ignite your popcorn too. Which is not necessarily always ideal, but it's a thing you might want to know. Now, what in my opinion massively changes how you play Gizmo is using his perks. The first perk that I really like is Bounce Bounce. Gizmo's air down special can bounce off his popcorn and his car toy to detonate it instantly. So now we can just use the down special here, and the car blows up, knocking them away pretty far. And likewise, put some popcorn here, down special that, and it'll detonate too. I find that trying to hit the popcorn with the bow mid-match can be somewhat difficult at times, and using your down special instead is just much easier a lot of the time. Second perk is Power Cuddle. While attached to his ally, Gizmo's charge attacks charge much faster. So you can see that here, this bow is very quickly fully charged and ignited, which is nice in itself. So this is a very strong perk if you heavily rely on this ability, if you're really good at team play with your ally. But you also have to have an ally that can kind of fend for himself and doesn't require you to basically peel one of the two enemies off them. So it's not really possible with every character, I think, personally. I think it's also very strong with the down attack especially. Charging that very quickly. Very beneficial because of the extra range that it gets. The third option is Rhythm's Gonna Getcha, and in this case, the silence that you normally have after 8 stacks is replaced with causing enemies to dance. You actually need 12 stacks if you do that, but while they're dancing, they're basically not doing anything else. The duration seems very, very brief though, so I'm not really sure if this would ever be worth a trade-off. The silence seems to be much, much longer, so I really don't know what this is about. I could see this perk being really strong if it wouldn't require extra stacks and the duration would be longer, but like this, I feel like his other perks will have more to offer most of the time. Getting 12 stacks on this is definitely not easy. For beginners, I would definitely recommend Bounce Bounce Boom. In my opinion, just the most straightforward and easily effective one, whereas an advanced player might be tending to play with more power cuddle depending on who they're playing with and everything. For additional perks, I would first of all suggest Make It Rain Dog because projectile speed's just really good on a character with a lot of projectiles. For the second perk, I'd go with Triple Jump, just to have even more survivability while off the stage. And as his third perk, it could actually be decent to get Tasmanian Trigonometry, just because his general knockback influence is relatively low, and he's not meant to knock people out. I think it's more meant to be him playing the supporty role, doing the poke, and then having the teammate knock enemies out, but just helping your team with that a little bit when his own knockback influence isn't that strong could be useful. There are obviously plenty of other perks that are useful as well. You could, for example, also go for That's Flammable Dog, especially if you don't care for Make It Rain. Or if you're facing an enemy with armor, you could go for Armor Crush, for example. Many, many more options. Just wanted to give you a general idea of some things that you can use well. There's also a combo I wanted to show you that is relatively nice to finish off enemies if you can manage to get them above 100, 110% and you do the down special. You can then follow that up with multiple up attacks, and sometimes that will be enough to knock them out. Again, perfecting Gizmo I think is extremely difficult. I think this is a very, very complex character, but I think learning him can be very rewarding because he can be extremely strong, deal very high damage if used right. Again, I don't think he's the best for knocking people out. I think he's more of a supplementary character most of the time that will have someone else with a strong knockout potential, with a strong spike, whereas he is more about dealing damage, providing utility, silencing enemies, and so on. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell for more MultiVersus guides. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. SLOTH, out.